Commissioner Precinct 2.
Here.
Gary Fickus, Commissioner Precinct 3. J.D. Johnson, Commissioner Precinct 4.
Here.
Constitutes a quorum.
Thank you. Our invocation this morning will be delivered by Rabbi Charlie Walker from the Congregation of Beth Israel in Colleyville. After the invocation, please remain standing for our pledges. Rabbi, thank you for coming out today. Thank you very much.
It's an honor. As the Commissioner's Court opens this Election Day morning, we ask God, whatever you conceive God to be, to open our hearts and minds to one another so that we're willing to suffer a little on behalf of each other. As we turn to you, the source of peace, it seems that no matter where we look today, politics, media, social media, on any topic, we find anything but peace. There's strife and contention, an unwillingness to listen or to hear. And so I come before the court this day, asking each and every one of us to suffer. You see, in Hebrew, the word sevel means to suffer, which is related to sovlanut, which means tolerance. So quite literally, the root of tolerance is suffering, especially when it comes to tolerating an idea that we disagree with. Instead of dismissing the idea or demonizing the individual or group offering that idea, we're encouraged to suffer, at least a little, in order to learn. Rabbi Meir teaches in the Talmud, in three things people are different from one another: in voice, in appearance, and opinions. Expressing the understanding that difference of opinion is natural and expected, not a personal offense. It is a cornerstone of our democracy. And another sage, Ben Zoma, asks, who is wise? One who learns from all people. On this day and every day, we pray that this court be granted the wisdom of good judgment and reverence for both the rule of law and the dignity and frailty within all of us. May this court be granted understanding that begins with a willingness to suffer, tolerating and carefully considering all points of view, which offers the knowledge that leads them and all of us to justice, to compassion, to truth. We thank you for this court, for its work, and for the opportunity to take part in our democracy. King Hiratson, may this be your will. And together we say, Amen.
Amen. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
Rabbi, could we please get a copy of your prayer this morning? Thank you very much. It was very appropriate.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Well, I could copy as well. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank
I'm
you,
just, the words of the prayer this morning were excellent.
Indeed.
Members of the board, on your agenda announcements, we have one announcement this morning. It deals with the Sheriff's Department, item 8J1. We're going to ask that that particular item be removed from consent. The only notation that, and the only reason we're removing that from consent is to make the court aware that this is a contract that has already expired. And we've already received the services, and normally in that situation, we do not do those on consent. We agree with the contract and are going to recommend that the court approve that. This is just to point out that that there was a delay on this particular contract. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Court members, you have before you the minutes of our regular meeting of November the 1st.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion to second. Any discussion? Hold on just 1 second. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. We have a couple of proclamations and resolutions today, and very fitting that it is on veterans. So before we get into it, as I just said, I think the rabbi's prayer this morning was very appropriate. As we said the pledge, I thought, as we said, one nation and then one state under God, that regardless of the outcome of the elections, tomorrow we are going to continue to be one nation and one state under God. I hope that each one of you has had an opportunity to vote or will vote today. It is a privilege that the folks that we're about to recognize have fought for, and many before them have given their lives so that we have that privilege and that honor. And so I certainly hope that each one of you have exercised that honor, and if not will as we go through today. So to begin with, I'm going to read a proclamation on Veterans Awareness Week. And Tom, would you come forward and be here at the podium to receive this? Whereas it is appropriate to salute those tens of thousands of men and women who have served and are serving in Americans' armed forces, and whereas it is recognized that during the past century, hundreds of thousands of Americans have given their lives while serving in the armed forces, and whereas many Tarrant County employees are among the brave men and women who have served or are serving in the armed forces, and whereas each November, Veterans Day is set aside as a time to honor those men and women who have so ably served in the armed forces of the United States, and whereas the contributions and sacrifices of the men and women who serve and are serving in the armed forces have been vital to maintaining the freedoms and the way of life enjoyed by the people of the United States. And whereas while we can never hope to fully repay those courageous men and women for their distinguished service to our nation, we can and must show our appreciation for their sacrifice. And whereas Veterans Day is observed on November the 11th, regardless of what day of the week on which it falls, to preserve the historical significance of the date and to focus attention on the important purpose of Veterans Day, a celebration to honor Americans' veterans for their patriotism, love of country, and willingness to serve and sacrifice for the common good. Now, therefore, be it resolved that we, the Commissioners Court of Tarrant County, do hereby recognize the week of November 7th through 11th, 2016, as Veterans Awareness Week, in witness whereof we have hereunto set our hands and caused the Great Seal of Tarrant County to be affixed this 8th day of November, 2016, and I'll move its approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. At this time, I would like to ask that all veterans in the audience today please rise, and let's thank them for their service. Wait a minute. All of y'all come on up here. And let's get everybody up here on the stage with our court. Come on forward. Morning. How are you? Morning, sir. How are you? Y'all come on up. Everybody in, and we're going to have to get close. Those of us that are vertically challenged will be here in the front. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Tom, did you have any comments that you wanted to make, or?
Yes, sir. I do want to thank the county judge and commissioners for their great support to veterans. As the rabbi said, we all may be different mindsets, but we must have tolerance. I've traveled to countries that where you vote, you don't have the right to vote, or if you vote incorrectly, that may cost someone their life. So I would encourage my peers here today to take part in your right to vote. It really is important, regardless how you see your political views. We are still, as you said, sir, one nation. And just real briefly, I'd like to recognize Sergeant Daniel Angus, a good friend of mine who was killed in action on 24 January 2010 in Helmand Province in Afghanistan. Whether Memorial Day, Veterans Day, someone who was a great mentor to myself. Unfortunately, he lost his life to an IED, and we continue to move on and represent what he stood for and why we support our veterans and their families today. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
And Commissioner Wynn.
Yes, Your Honor, I move for the ratification of a resolution honoring the Blue and Gold Star veteran families of the Vietnam War, which will be presented on November the 11th.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Next, you have before you the consent agenda.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Ms. Tidwell.
Ms. Tidwell.
We have one item that we're asking the court to consider this morning, and that is to receive and file the auditor's report of the Tarrant County Housing Assistance Office Inspection Program. We have the response from the Housing Department attached. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions.
Move to receive and file.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Ms. Glenn.
Move to receive and file the personnel agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file the personnel agenda. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. It's good to have you back. We're sorry.
morning.
We'll keep you in our prayers. So.
Thank you, I appreciate
Man.
that. So we have one additional item for the court, actually two, I'm sorry, this morning. The second item is we're asking the court to approve the waiver of terminal benefits for human services. Ms. Parks is requesting a waiver of 124 vacation hours effective November the 21st, the details of which are explained in your court communique. There is net savings, if the court approves these items, to the general fund of approximately $10,300.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
And our final item is item number 3. We're asking the court to approve a letter of agreement and business associate agreement between Integer Health Technologies, LLC in Tarrant County for health plan data modeling. So the court will recall a couple of weeks ago, Ms. Worthy, I think, gave you a good briefing on this item. Just as a quick reminder, Integer Health Technologies use analytics to identify medical and workers' comp providers who have been proven to return employees to work sooner at a lower cost. What Integer Technologies needs to conduct their analysis is data input from us that's comprised of 3 years worth of medical and workers' comp claims data, along with 3 years of attendance data from the county. So what we're asking the court to consider today is a payment of $5,000 to Integer Health so that they can begin their analysis. The deliverable, once their analysis is conducted, will be a report, that will identify those physicians, those providers who are able to return our employees to work at a lesser cost with some anticipated or estimated cost savings. The next step after that, if a court would wish to pursue additional measures, would then be to look at whether or not this is technology that we would like to incorporate into our system going forward. So today the request is for a $5,000 payment. As explained in your court communique, there could be additional costs. One cost could be consulting services that would be required or might be required to actually extract the attendance data from SAP. The estimate that IT has given us for this consulting work would be a $100 an hour rate with hours not to exceed 120 hours.
How much extra money is it gonna, we're not just voting for 5,000. We're voting for a lot
It
more
would be
cost than that.
5,000 plus the cost that I just described, the $100 per hour rate for 120 hours worth of consulting work. And Commissioner, what that would do, that consulting work would actually extract the data, the HR data that's necessary for Integer to conduct its analysis. So on the high end, we'd be looking at $12,000. That's $100 an hour at $120 an hour.
Now, that takes us through the point of saying, are we even willing to consider going forward after this? Is there enough savings that we might be willing? At that point in time, I think we have two approaches that we have to look at. I think we have to determine, one, whether it's an RFP, because it'll be a sizable enough number that we would be looking at either an RFP or we would have to be asked to consider a sole source. But none of that, we don't even get to that level until such time as that we as a court have the ability to look at the data that they come back with and to determine whether or not they feel like this is something that's worthwhile. Fort Worth has done this, and I think they have they have moved forward, but we're not at the step, we haven't gotten to the point in time yet of evaluating. So what we're asking is, or what I would like to see us do, is get to the first level, and then at that point in time, look at the data, let our folks look at it and say, yeah, we think this might be something that would help. And then at that point in time, if we decide it is, then we're going to have to get with purchasing and with the administrator's office and decide whether or not it's an RFP or whether it's a sole source and how we go forward from there.
My concern is, go ahead.
But what we're actually voting on today is not 5,000, it's possibly 17,000.
Correct. That's correct.
And my concern is, have you consulted with our purchasing agent and our district attorney regarding compliance to the requirement of state law regarding fair and open bidding? My concern is this: by providing Integer with the opportunity to gain intelligence into our employee data, once we determine that this potentially may be a potential benefit for us, some serious saving, then we will be required to go out for an open, competitive bidding process. And when possibly, but if the price is over $50,000 or so, then we would still have to go out for an open RFP. And when that happens, I fear that Integer may be perceived or realistically gain an unfair competitive edge over the other vendors, which in turn make it difficult for Integer as a company to move forward. So if this is truly a sole source, then I would recommend that this court declare this service a sole source. Then we can proceed in the process. And if this service is not a sole source, then and if you believe this is a potentially good option for us to look at, then we need to open it up at the very beginning so that we can be compliant with state law. And that is my concern.
Well, Commissioner, I don't think, we're going to be compliant with state law, But the question is under that theory, then anybody who thinks that they've got something that might help us could only show us that they couldn't perform anything to look at that. I mean, if you're basically saying that before we're going to do this, we have to have an RFP, you know, I think it's one of those things where you've got to start the process someplace, and then if there is an RFP, there has to be an RFP, and if it's sole source, then we have to look at it and determine whether it's sole source. The biggest factor that we don't have control over a lot of times in our budget is our healthcare costs. And this past year, they went up over 25%. And I think we need to look at every possibility to try to bring that down. And a lot of that's going to be taking the first step to say, does it look like that we could improve within healthcare? And then once we've determined that, okay, this is something we need to look at, then I think at that point in time, we determine whether there are other companies out there that can do it, or whether there's only one company that we can look at. But, you know.
Your Honor, my concern is not with the why or the what. My concern is with the how. Okay. Certainly we need to look for ways to reduce the cost of our health insurance. That I'm totally on board with you about that. But I fear that by approving this transaction today, we would inadvertently put a cloud over the head of Integer should we decide to move forward with an open bidding process. People and vendors may come forward and protest that by doing this, Integer has already gained an unfair competitive advantage.
But in order for us to determine whether we need to go forward, someone's going to have to do that. And do we let each entity? I mean, we can let each and every entity do that.
Maybe we can open up the process. If you think this is viable for us to look at, according to your recommendation, then I think we should either declare this a sole source, or we open it up and ask for the market to basically provide us with the information. And maybe we select 2 or 3 companies to look at our data and then pick the best one. And I think that would be a more, it's not efficient, but it would be a more effective process in the long run.
I still have the same concerns that I had a couple of weeks ago when we looked at this. But I agreed that I would let it go forward and look at the results of the first piece of work and decide whether I thought that it either validated or invalidated my concerns with the process. I must admit that we're not starting off real well by going from a $5,000 expense to a $17,000 expense. However, in the scheme of things, that may be a justifiable expense. At least it's one that I'm willing to suffer at this point. And I assume that the results of this process will be public record so that every vendor who is interested in participating in the next step will have access to the same data that Integer has access to.
The information that we're pulling together that you talked about being $100 an hour, that's going to be our folks pulling together that data. So certainly, and then the other data is the data from United Healthcare, which is our data. So the only thing what I'm saying, Commissioner, is the data that they're going to use is all our data. So it will be available. The proprietary system that they put it all through, it would be kind of like the RFP. Here's the information that we have. What other information do you need? But the data itself.
The results of the process will be public record. The report that we are given to consider whether to go forward will be public record. Will it not?
I would assume
It can't be. It cannot be because many of the data fields that I observed via the supporting documents are highly sensitive data. They are protected by HIPAA. including social security numbers of the employees. So when we provide the vendors with the data so they can basically analyze the information and extract intelligence from it, I think it's part of the transaction that we are deliberating today is for Integer to eventually purge the data from their system altogether.
But they, like any other vendor, will have to sign the same
Confidentiality agreement, yes,
with
sir.
regards to HIPAA, so the information is available.
Right.
It's not available to the public, but it is available to anyone.
And
If
I
we can-
hope it won't be available to us.
It
I don't
will
need
not be.
anybody's social security number.
Tina, PEBC, do we have similar services to this already or not?
Well, through PEBC, and actually specifically United Healthcare, there are some analytics that are done. Certainly they don't take into account attendance data because that's not information that we provide. But with United Healthcare, you all may recall that in their system they do designate some providers, and I've forgotten what the exact designation is, but they've actually run a similar analysis, I guess it's similar analysis, to determine which physicians provide the most effective services at lowest cost. And so those providers are identified in our network to our participants, to our members, to their family members. And so when employees actually seek out those specific services, their co-payments are lower. And so, yes, to a degree, there's that kind of analysis and service provided. Again, the component that's not taken into consideration is the attendance data. And so I think that's what Integer brings to this process that we don't currently have in place.
Did you say Fort Worth had contracted for this service?
They have. It's my understanding, and I believe Dr. McCallum is here. He could certainly speak.
Pardon me, I couldn't hear you.
Dr. McCallum, I believe, is here. He could speak in more specifics. But, Commissioner, my understanding of what Integer provides, the service that they provide for the city of Fort Worth, is that they're doing a similar analysis of their workers' comp data. So you recall that Tarrant County actually has a workers' comp network that we've had in place now for over 5 years, where we've identified with help from York, our third-party administrators, those providers who provide cost-efficient services and get employees back to work more quickly. So we have something similar in place already here at Tarrant
But
County
isn't
on the
Fort Worth
workers'
also
comp.
using York?
Pardon?
I think that Fort Worth is
Yes.
also using
Yes, I
York.
think York is fairly new to the city of Fort Worth, like in the last year or so.
Is
So they-
anyone using anyone else other than York?
For this kind of
That
an
we know of.
analysis? No, sir, not that I know of. Not for the medical piece.
Commissioner Johnson, let me clarify what you were asking. When we talk about Integer is who we're talking about. You
Okay.
asked if Fort Worth is using, Ms. Glenn mentioned that we had gone to York as ours, and that they were doing a little bit of this. York is also doing Fort Worth, but Fort Worth believes in what they're doing with Integer, that Integer is still able to go in and look at York and potentially evaluate whether there may be further savings that could be acquired. So that's what I was saying when I asked about York. York is just our workers'
Okay.
comp.
And I think the difference, Judge Whitley, is that, it's my understanding, the city of Fort Worth doesn't necessarily have a network. I think they have in place what we had in place more than 5 years ago, where we actually allowed employees to pretty much seek services from any doctor that they wish to for treatment of their injuries. What we've had in place for the past 5 years is a network, a workers' comp network, that's similar to our medical provider network. So we, in fact, have a network, and employees who are injured on the job actually operate within that network. So, and I think this Integer has done something similar for the city.
As Tina mentioned, Dr. McCallum is here. Why don't we bring him forward if he would like to come and answer some of the questions that you've heard posed this morning.
Well, I don't know if he can answer the question I've got. My question is any other governmental agency using anyone other than this company?
for this kind of an analysis that we're
Yes.
talking about? I don't believe so, but Dr. McCallum could address that better than I could.
All right.
Let me see if I can answer a couple of these things. I'm not sure, so stop me if I'm not answering the right question. The answer in terms of governmental agencies and this sort of service in this area, the answer to that is no.
Well, in this area, meaning what?
Meaning in
State of Texas?
well, probably the Metroplex, but the state of Texas as well, because we've got discussions going on all over the state. The Fort Worth issue is that we've looked at this in two separate blocks. We've looked at their benefits system and we've looked at their workman's comp system. Their workman's comp system has what's called a 504 network. They're allowed to adjust their provider network pretty much at will. And which is not the case in benefits. With comp, we have an ongoing project with them looking at the different parts of the provider community so that they can make an optimal network in terms of getting people back to work the most quickly at the lowest possible cost. That's an ongoing project. The benefits project with Fort Worth, we've done what we've asked here, which is we pulled the data. We pulled the HR data and the claims data from United, and we're running that analysis for them now to see if it works for them to do an ongoing relationship down the road. So basically, the city has done what we're asking you to do. Does that get to the answer to your question?
I think so.
Sorry if it doesn't.
Why are we just now hearing about the additional $12,000?
Well, that came from a discussion that we had with county employees at the end of last week. Their estimate for what it would take to pull the HR data was, I'll be honest with you, it was quite a lot higher than any of the other people that we've talked to and we've worked with. That was a bit of a surprise to me that they would need that. You'd have to ask them about why the thought was to use an outside consultant rather than internal resources. That's above my pay grade.
And Dr. McConnell, you believe that your service proposed in this transaction is a sole source?
We actually, in the process of a patent application, used a pretty widely respected patent application firm to do the search, to look to see if there was another service like this anywhere in the country. And the short answer is there's not. And we're happy to provide you with the information from that search if you wish. We can do that. But there really isn't anybody doing quite what we're doing.
So if this court needs information to vote and declare that your service is a sole source, you wouldn't have a problem backing that up,
not.
right?
Absolutely not. We can probably get you the results of that search from that law firm.
Okay. And that's one option. The other option is if you're the only service provider in this field, in this area, then when we go out to the open market, then you would be the only responder.
You won't find anyone else who is taking both HR data and claims data to try to get a handle on outcomes and cost. No one else is doing that. And you won't find anyone else.
That's not to say no one else could do that.
Depends on the results of our patent application, I suppose, but no, I suppose not.
So, Dr. McCollum, my concern has nothing to do with you nor your organization. I did some checking regarding your background, and you have nothing but utmost respect from me. But from my standpoint, I need to make sure that we have our purchasing requirements, that we are fully able to meet those requirements. And I cannot support this transaction. And I want to make sure you understand it's not because of you or the organization. It is, I want to make sure that we follow a process that is legally and ethically acceptable.
I mean, I think, again, I think all of us want to do that, and I don't think we're proposing anything here at this time that doesn't do that. But that's my opinion. Any other questions of Dr. McCallum at this time? Thank you.
Does the DA's office have an opinion on this?
Well, the only thing we were asked to look at is the approval from a legality standpoint of this pilot program, this analysis, which is a one-year commitment at an estimated expense of $17,000 or somewhere around there. It's below the $50,000 limit by which competitive bidding is required under the local government code. So from a legal compliance standpoint, there is no competitive bidding issue. That said, if the Commissioner's Court decides to go forward with this after the analysis in a year, obviously we would have to look at the circumstances then, including the amount, and determine the extent to which competitive is appropriate, competitive bidding is required, and or whether sole source is even an issue. But that is not the issue here. This is purely up to the Commissioner's Court on whether the Commissioners want to go forward with this pilot program to see whether or not it does want to or not want to entertain a contract at the end of the analysis after looking at the report. It's $17,000. It's within the amount that where competitive bidding is not required.
And I think I have
Yeah,
one thing.
that's what I wanted to ask you from
I
this.
want to add one comment. Just so that it's in the record, if we were to go forward, the pricing that has been proposed is a 3-year contract that in my estimation would be somewhere over $400,000 to $500,000 a year potentially. We could negotiate maybe a better rate, but at the rates that were originally quoted, you'd be looking at a 3-year contract for $1.5 million. So I just want to make sure that in light of what you're talking about today, that you realize that if you went forward, this is not a small sum.
And I was going to ask you, I thought what you were going to refer to is, where did y'all come up with the estimate on the $100 and
As it was
$120?
discussed in the EGO meeting this morning, we have limited resources in the CCC. There are these files that have to be brought in from PEBC, from the workers' comp, and then all of the data that they've asked for to be extracted and put into a format in a file. I was very adamant myself that that file be made as generic as it can be so that we don't have to recreate that same sort of file down the road if we should go out and look for other vendors. And so the estimate was that they really, probably the person that's on staff that would have to do this is David Petrucia himself, or we would have to hire someone. Obviously, there's always lots of projects that are already on the plate to take the time and resources of David and his staff. And so to do this in the time frame that it was being looked at, he felt that he would need an outside resource.
And but specifically what we're pulling in from the county though is, I want to be sure I understand, United Healthcare will dump their data with it all scrubbed the way they want.
Well, it'll come, David will have to bring that file in through the PEBC from United. I mean, there's
Why?
one file.
I mean, I'm just, because
I'm not
it was,
the IT expert, I'm just telling you what I heard in the meeting, so.
I thought that what we were pulling from county, from our SAP system, was the hours, the breakdown of whether it was vacation or different things.
Well,
like
there's
that.
more than that, because if you look at the list that they've asked for the data,
Right.
there's all kinds of information from job title, they actually wanted leave.
But that's
term.
what's in that estimate.
Yes, but the information they're asking for, we're not just preparing a file that says Mary Smith was out 8 hours.
And
It's
Judge,
much more complicated.
the specific specifications are actually a part of your packet. And as Renee has indicated, it is pretty specific. If you flip right past you have your court communique, and then you should have a letter from Integer, 3 or 4 pages, a statement of work with deliverables. The page after that is where you get into the actual data specifications. I hope that's part of your packet because it's a part of mine.
Yeah.
Okay, do you see that?
Is that the one that's the letter from Scott Roloff?
Mm-hmm. So flip past that, you should see statement of work, deliverables.
Yeah.
You see that? Okay, then flip one more page.
Okay.
Okay, and then
Wait a
that's,
minute, one more page. That one more page I don't have.
you don't have that one?
Page
No,
one.
that's statement of work or statement of deliverables?
Well, you have a statement of work deliverables, and then the very next page, do you have a very next page?
Okay, let me get to the,
It's headed Human Resources Data Specifications Request.
Yeah, there it is. Okay.
So that specifically is what is being asked for from the county. So again, there are several fields of data. What we currently don't have is, we don't have like job descriptions connected to each individual. So that would be
They did agree to just use the job
title. Okay.
We're not going to be looking for the $1,400.
So, Judge, to your question, to your point, that's the information they'd be looking for from us. And then past that page, if you flip again, then you see the specs for the balance of the information that's being requested. There's medical data, claims data, there's pharmacy data.
and is that what's coming from United?
Yes, sir. And then the only other piece that you don't see here will be the workers' comp piece. And of course, we'll work directly with York to see what their specification requirements are. But it is pretty involved. It will be pretty involved.
It seems to me that I've heard projected savings in the range of $500,000 a year. If that's what our projected savings are going to be, then our projected cost and our projected savings is going to be a wash. And that doesn't seem like a good deal to me.
Dr. McCallum raised his hand back there on that, so.
Commissioner Brooks, let me,
Could you come forward, please, so we,
I don't believe that's a savings.
I do need to address that a little bit, just briefly. We looked at government organizations with employee populations that are, within 20% of what you all have, with annual healthcare spends on the benefits side of just shy of $100 million. The savings, and understand that I'm not projecting that you will get this money, but if we model the what was spent, for instance, in 2015 for an organization like that, against what would have been spent had they used average providers, not the best, but just the average, the savings on that just shy of $100 million would have been about $21 million. The numbers are quite large. That speaks to the fact that if you look around the country, if you look at healthcare spend, about 30% of healthcare spend is for things that are either done ineffectively, inefficiently, or inappropriately. That is where the leeway is. It's really quite a large number that we're talking about, not really $500,000. It's a lot of money. And we can, and if you wish, or if the court wishes, I'm happy to provide the references and back that up there. Plenty of.
again, if it's the court's wishes to delay, I mean, we'll go with whatever the court wishes, obviously. I think that for what potentially may be, again, the stuff that they're going to be getting from York, the stuff they're going to be getting from United Healthcare, they have gotten that. That was, in part, the $5,000 was for the work that was going to be being done between United Healthcare and York. They get that information. The information that they're going to be drawing from us, again, is going to be the job titles, as Tina just, suggested and pointed to. There's information that they're going to be pulling out of our SAP system, and the cost. I don't deny the fact that we've got a busy schedule and our people can't get to it, and I respect if he feels like they've got to go out as opposed to doing it within. That's just a cost associated with that. And then the cost, it may be up to $12,000. We have got to find a way to begin looking at some of these costs. Last year, our costs went up 25%. There's another, I'll be honest with you, there's another thing that I'm trying to get Diana to look at in the way of pharmacy. we've got to find a way to scrub some of these costs and to bring that healthcare cost down or make it a little bit more efficient as we go forward, or it's going to continue to, we're going to continue to experience the increases that we've experienced this past year. For that, I think that looking at it and possibly spending $17,000 is appropriate to determine whether or not we feel like we could go forward and possibly save the other. If not this, we better find something else, or we're gonna be in a hole, or we've got to find a way to get a hold of these costs. And I'll move approval just to see if I can get a second.
I'll second it to see if you can get a third.
I'd like to see you delay it for a week or two. But
So you'd like me to delay it for a week, 2 weeks?
yeah, a couple of weeks.
I'd like to see, make sure that we are compliant with state law.
I don't mind delaying it for a couple of weeks, but Commissioner, you've heard your DA and you've heard everyone say that we are compliant with state law as we go forward right now.
In this transaction, yes.
That's right.
But when we take the second step, and when we open up this bid, Integer would be having a leg up comparing to other competitors because they have already possessed the intelligence.
But
and other vendors don't.
They'll get the same intelligence. Someone at some point has got to determine whether we need to take the first step and go forward after that first step. So in any case like this, in all likelihood, someone is going to, under your scenario, then in those situations, someone's going to get eliminated because they took the first step to help us decide whether or not to go forward.
Either we open it up and let those who are interested in our business to look into our system, or we declare this a sole source. You heard from the doctor himself. He believes that no other organization in the nation is providing this type of service. Then it would be more prudent for this court to declare this is a sole source service, and then we can move forward.
What would we need, and who would we need it from in order to declare this a sole source contract?
Jack? Because that may be what we do, and if we go ahead and delay for a couple of weeks, then we'll go through the sole source discussion and make that plain before we go that first step.
We'd like to have the opportunity to look at the patent information. The first we heard about this project was last week. I'd rather be able to give you our opinion than stand on these hot lights this morning. At this point in time, so we'd like the opportunity to take a look at that. It may full well be a sole source, just like the DA said. Purchasing is okay with, obviously, with your decision to spend that kind of money. Everybody wants a piece of Tarrant County. I get those calls every day. It makes it very difficult for me to fend off everybody when we are involved in a situation like this. It may full well be a sole source. We'd like the opportunity to check it out, to search the internet to see who else is out there. At least you would have my professional opinion as to is it or is it not.
How many sole source contracts do we have right now?
Right now,
Probably within some estimate.
Wow.
Not just all over, I mean.
Everything that we have declared a sole source.
You have 3 on the agenda today.
Not thousands and thousands. We've been very cautious with that because I know I've made the statement in the past. I also realize once we declare a sole source and it's not one, there won't be any more. So I've been very cautious with that privilege for the last 20 years. I just like the opportunity to take a look and see what we can find. I think that would be the way to do it.
Then I'm more than fine with going ahead and delaying this for a couple of weeks. I would like for you to work on that to determine whether or not you feel like it's going to ultimately be a sole source.
We've kicked back an awful lot of them that people, and I'm not saying that to you, Doctor, but that are marketing letters. We kick them out all the time. They want to be sole sources, but at the end of the day, they're not. So if we'd had the opportunity, love to take it.
That's fine.
Then we'll go ahead and delay for a couple of weeks and go forward.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you.
Come on back.
We have 5 items for your consideration this morning. Our first item is a bid award recommendation for RFP 2016-189. This is an RFP for digitization of the Commissioners Court recordings on cassette tape. Recommendation would be to award per the terms of the contract, awarding to Matson Creative, Matson Multimedia. If you choose to approve this, we're also seeking contract approval from the court.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Why do we need to do this?
These are the very old tapes that we had recorded the court minutes prior to going to the current system, and they're cassette tapes, and we simply need to digitize them to be able to save those.
We're digitizing cassette tapes.
Yes.
We're not creating new cassette tapes.
No, sir.
I got it.
Please
Go
vote.
forward, not backward.
Motion passes unanimously.
Our second item is also a bid award recommendation for RFP 2016-221. This is an RFP for prisoner extradition services. Recommendation would be to award the primary and secondary vendors is shown in your court communique per the terms of the contract. Again, we're seeking contract approval if you choose to approve this.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Item number 3 is, again, a bid award recommendation for bid 2017-004, assigning a contract for paper and plastic products. Our recommendation would be to award on a per enterprise basis, awarding to the primary and secondary vendors meeting all specifications as you see in the court communique.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Item number 4, again, is a bid award recommendation for bid 2017-006. This is a bid for resurfacing the in-ground pool at the Tarrant County Resource Connection. Recommendation would be to award Premier Fiberglass Incorporated the amount of $78,162. Again, we're seeking contract approval and acceptance of the payment and performance bond.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Our last item is an item in regards to bid 2016-121, which is an annual contract for erosion control, hydromold services and materials. We initially brought this to Commissioner's Court on June 7th, 2016. It was approved under Court Order 122732. We are recommending cancellation of the award, of which there were 5 items to Hudson Site Control. We received a letter from them on October the 18th stating that they could no longer honor their prices. We would recommend removing them from the bidders list for 2 years and re-awarding to the primary, secondary, and alternate vendors as shown in the court. Okay.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jack.
You will acknowledge the score of the Arkansas LSU game this next week, right?
Sure I will.
Thank you.
How bad did y'all get beat by Alabama? Are you sure? How bad did you get beat by Auburn? You want me to acknowledge those scores too? Are there any appointments today?
Yes,
What
sir,
about
Your
the
Honor.
sheriff's department item?
That's right. We were moving that from consent. I'm sorry about that. Come forward.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning.
Morning.
It is requested that the Commissioners Court approve the Motorola Solutions Service Agreement utilizing the State of Texas Department of Information and Resources DIR contract, DIR SDD 2203 with Motorola Solutions for the amount of $34,532.40.
Why did we pull this off of consent?
Because contract is already started.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank
Y'all
you.
understand that the process is to come to court first. right?
Understand that, sir. I didn't get involved in this till 3 weeks ago, and the vendor didn't send the contract to Tarrant County until October 11th at the earliest. The vendor rep changed, and the individual involved in IT is no longer there, so.
All right.
Yes, sir.
This is simply an informational, the reason why we took it off consent.
Good, thank you.
Well, but it's not if,
That's not.
it's really not if we started a year and we didn't have a contract.
Sorry, the contract started in October of 16, going through, the contract period is for, according to the court communication, is October 1. So what it is, we're 5 weeks into this contract.
But I guess I understand what you're saying. I understand it's just informational. But we're approving a contract 5 weeks into it,
Yes,
as opposed to 5 weeks before it.
that's correct.
And that's what I think we're all saying. And you explained, IT's rep's not there, but we need some way to flag so that this doesn't happen.
Yes, sir. I
We
agree.
do have a contract management module in SAP that we are not using. Hint, hint.
You're turning red, but you shouldn't be the only one turning red. So,
Y'all are messing up my election day.
Well, think about what the rabbi said this morning.
Fickus went hunting.
I know.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Motion passes unanimously. Now are there any appointments?
Yes, sir. I make motion to reappoint Ms. Linda Diapert to represent the county on TERS number 4, which is the Arlington Highlands, and TERS number 5, which is the Entertainment District.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Commissioner Fickus?
Commissioner.
How about
I
Commissioner
don't think
Johnson?
he's here, and if you're calling me Fickus, we got serious problems. I have an appointment to the,
Blue ribbon.
what are we calling it, Blue Ribbon Committee, Sarah Hollenstein.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. You have before you if there are no other appointments, you have before you the claims, including the addendum.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Briefing items, Mr. Manning?
Your Honor, we do not have any briefing items this morning.
Okay, then, at this time, we will recess our open meeting to proceed to close to discuss items exempted under section 551.071, 072, 07. First time, wasn't it?
Second time.
Second time? How did I miss?
Second
Did you do it last week?
Yeah. You didn't even notice.
It's the third time it appeared before me. We won't get into that first time.
Let's not.
Having returned from our closed session and there being no business to conduct at this time, we are adjourned.
Thought her son was present.